sweet or the very high carb or very simple sugar food that'll satiate you for just a little while, but then you'll drop. So what we're trying to do with the snacking is to be able to incorporate some fiber into this, some delicious taste into it, and some long-lasting carbohydrates to keep those blood sugars at a nice even keel throughout, and to give you a feeling of being satiated. And that's what these recipes are going to do. So with that, I'll let Chef get started with his first recipe, and I'll interject some other nutrition information as we go along.
All right. So as I already said, welcome to our second Snack and Chat in the series. I believe we have 2 more ahead of us. If you missed the last one, you missed out, but I believe it is recorded. So check with Rebecca and she can probably get you that link. Don't quote me on that because I'm not sure if it is recorded. But the 2 items we're going to make today is going to be what's called crispy spiced chickpeas. And then we're also going to do our rendition of a bruschetta. Of course, crispy chickpeas is just seasoned chickpeas that we're roasting in the oven at a medium temperature, and it goes for about 40 to 45 minutes, so all the moisture inside of it dries out and gives you a nice crispy crunch. For our bruschetta today, we're using some fresh tomatoes, some basil, some parsley, a couple little spices going into it. I'm gonna show you 2 different techniques of how we're gonna cut our bread up for today, and offer some different variations on how you can make this easier for yourself. You're gonna make it for a lot of people, just for one person, just for you, yourself, and I. I won't judge you at all because I make meals for 3 people all the time, and it's just me, myself, and I. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our curried chickpeas. And when I say this recipe is so simple, it honestly doesn't get much simpler than this. You're gonna have your chickpeas, which we've rinsed and drained. So the reason we wanna rinse it and drain it is because chickpeas are in a liquid, which basically preserves the chickpea. Funny thing about that liquid can be turned into a thickener if you're a vegan. So that liquid's called aquafaba. Is something that vegans and vegetarians use to thicken things up instead of using like the cornstarch or the arrowroot powder. All right, so we're gonna have some chickpeas that I have rinsed off, drained, and it says to pat it dry. You can either pat it dry or you can just let it drain for a longer period of time, which is what I did for this operation. But they're still pretty dry. They're not too wet, which if they are wet, you can just take a paper towel and just run it over it to get that extra moisture off, because if it's too wet, what's going to happen is you're going to steam them faster than you're going to actually dry them out. It's going to take longer to cook. And then the herbs and spices won't necessarily stick as well as we want them to do. So the herbs and spices that we have, one is going to be salt, which I'm using kosher salt. Don't want to use iodized salt because iodized salt just sits on top of the food. Whatever you put it on, it just sits on top. Doesn't really add much flavor. People think, oh, it's salted, but you ever get that twang like in the back of your mouth? That's that iodized salt that's in there. So just go ahead and use kosher salt. One, it tastes better, and also it looks better, just personal preference. And then there's black pepper. We have some ground coriander, which is basically coriander is the seed of cilantro. We have some cumin, some paprika, and a little bit of cinnamon. Cinnamon is one of those things where people don't recognize it's in there, but it accents a lot of flavors and it makes your bolder flavors push up. So if you do a lot of Indian dishes, which of course, a lot of Indian dishes use chickpeas, they put cinnamon in it because it takes all those other flavors and it like pushes them to the forefront. So I'm just go ahead and just dump all of these seasonings in here. Face it towards you so you can actually see it.
Chef is also adding a load of antioxidants to those chickpeas right now. All those antioxidants that help us with our immune boosting capacity. Every one of those is loaded with antioxidants.
All right, and then we're also going to add some extra virgin olive oil, just enough to coat it. All right, and then if you want to use your hands, by all means, or if you don't like getting your hands dirty, you can use a spatula or a spoon. If you have children or older adults who are just so bored out of their mind, this is something you can easily give to them. Like, look, play with the chickpeas, make a mess, not too much of a mess, and at the end of the day, you'll have a nice little snack. So literally, that's it. You take this, you pour it on a sheet pan, put it in the oven at 350 for about 40 to 45 minutes. And I think I left mine in for close to an hour only because I am working in an industrial kitchen and you can't control who opens the oven, when they open the oven. But if you're at home and no one's really going to open the oven, that 40 to 45 minute range should be fine. Take them out, press on them a little bit, do a couple ones at the middle of some that are on the outside to make sure that they don't have any bounce back to them. But they should be nice and crispy. And I have my little magic oven down here. Ooh, voila. And there it is. As you can hear, You can hear they're completely nice and crisp and dried out. They have a nice color on it, but they're not like dark or whatnot. I'm gonna try one. Oh, I missed. You guys didn't see that. Perfect crunch. Beautiful. I can eat like 10 of these right now, but I'll get distracted, so I'll stop while I'm ahead.
While Chef is changing over, one of the really neat things about garbanzo beans, are also called chickpeas, is that they're a slow acting starch within the body. So they're actually going to help mediate blood sugar levels. They'll help them keep them at a nice even keel throughout the day. It's a combination of a slow acting starch, it also has a lot of fiber in it as well. So this is a really good snack. So whether you're taking the garbanzo beans and cooking them like this, or whether you're grinding them up and making hummus, or pressing them together and making hummus, you really cannot beat this slow acting starch that's released from these garbanzo beans. This is the type of slow acting carbohydrate that we're looking for.
All right. Our next item up for grabs, let's get some on the prices right now, is going to be our tomato bruschetta. Why is it called a tomato bruschetta? Because it's made with tomatoes. I've never really had a bruschetta made with anything outside of tomatoes. Sorry, I saw a question pop up. If you do get fresh garbanzo beans, when I say fresh, I mean like out the field fresh, you do have to peel them, but then you also have to cook them and then cool them so you can actually cook them again, because they are in a raw state. It's just easier to go ahead and get the ones that are in the can and just go forward from there. I'm not sure if there was another question. I just happened to see that one pop up, so I thought I'd answer while I was thinking about it. All right, so the bread I'm going to use today is just going to be a natural baguette. This one is kind of light skinned, but it's okay. This is what's called par baked, because it comes basically par baked and you just brown it in your oven yourself. If you want to, you can buy the ones out of your local grocery store. It could be French baguette. It could be Italian baguette. It could be a wide one, a skinny one, a mini one. Honestly, as long as it's bread that you can cut that's just not like sliced bread, you should be good to go. Baguette's just the preferred because it holds up really nicely when you go to roast it in the oven. So I'm gonna show you two ways that we're gonna cut this baguette, just depending on what your application method is going to be. So the first one is gonna be our normal baguette slice, which we wanna get some medium slices. You don't want them too thin, because if they're too thin, so I'm gonna show you one that's too thin so you know what too thin is. So this is too thin, where it almost looks kind of like a roof shingle. You don't want too thin, because this is gonna, you put this on a pan with something like this, the small one's gonna burn fast, and you don't want that. And then you also don't want them too thick, because then it's just gonna be like a mouthful of breadcrumbs, and no one likes a mouthful of breadcrumbs. But if you do, I will not judge you at all. You do you. Like they say, that's your business. All right, so I'm gonna get a couple of these slices here. I'm gonna try to keep them all the same. You don't wanna go too big, not too small. I think these are pretty perfect. I'm pretty good with slicing things in a uniform method. So don't beat yourself up at home if you don't slice them perfectly like Chef Ted did. I'm a trained professional most days. So don't tell my boss I just said that. All right, so look at that, perfect, nicely done. All right, so this would be if you're gonna do like an appetizer type thing. If so, one, maybe a 2-bite, you can easily, like you can see it fits inside my hand. I can fit this in my mouth easily, but most of the time I would do it with a 2-bite. If you're going to do it more of an appetizer, so say for instance, you're doing like a 3-course dinner and you wanna have a nice bruschetta appetizer, you can take your loaf and you'll put your knife at an angle and do a really hard angle on it. This will give you more of a bite comparison to that small 2-biter. And you can either put these in a bowl and display them, or if you're making them individual plates, you can put 3 or 4 on a plate, or 5. But chefs like to do odd numbers and not even numbers. It's just something about the eyes. It does something when you have an odd amount. All right, so you see these are a lot longer pieces and they display kind of, a lot prettier. So what you do with this, you just put these on a sheet pan, rub it down with some extra virgin olive oil, and just roast it in the oven, probably about 400 degrees, about 8 to 10 minutes. Pay attention to it, because there's 2 things that happens with crostinis. It's either cooked or it's burnt. there's no in between. Once it gets burnt, you're kind of done. You have to start over. I've done it many times. So promise, the second you take your eyes off of it is the second it happens. If you want to be tricky and you want to use the broil method, I would say literally stand there and watch it, because the second it turns around, you need to pull it out, flip it around or flip it over so it doesn't burn. I put these in my magic oven, and out of my magic oven comes my toasted crostinis. Voila, look at that. So these are the small ones that I was mentioning here. And then these are the larger ones that I have in the back right here. So this is actually where you could display it. If you wanted to do a nice big bowl of the bruschetta, you can display some small pieces, some big pieces, just like that. Perfectly fine. All right. Now we're gonna get on to the meat of it, or I guess not the meat, it's the vegetable of it. Pun intended. Good one, chef. Thanks. All right, so we're gonna have our tomatoes. We're gonna dice up our tomatoes pretty small. All right, the way we're gonna do this, I'm gonna bowl out. I'm gonna take the top off, and I'm gonna take the bottom off. And this is the easiest method for me. If you wanna use all of it, including the seeds, go for it. I personally do not prefer the seeds in my bruschetta, so I always take the seeds out. Get the spread off. All right, so the easiest way to do this, get just the top off, the bottom off. I'm gonna cut it straight down the middle. And as you can see, the seeds kind of start to separate from the inside of there. And I'm just gonna roll my knife along the inside of this tomato very carefully. And as the seed part pulls away, it really just rolls pretty much right out. And I have the seed part in the middle. And then I have the rind. So those little seeds in the middle, we can just pluck those out into a bowl. Or if you want to put them in there, by all means, I will not stop you. I'm sure the seeds have some healthy attributes to it that Valerie can comment on. I just don't prefer
Well, I
the
was going to
seeds.
ask you, Chef, if I were making like a stew or a chili, could I add those pieces to them?
Of course, you can definitely save them and add them to a stew or a chili or a salad. Or if you're composting, you're going to throw those in there, by all means. If you're making healthy smoothies and you like tomatoes, I definitely won't stop you on that one. But that's a new one for me. I don't want it adds a water content that I don't want.
Okay.
So if you put the seeds in there, I would suggest you eat it within a day or so. If you don't put the seeds, you can probably get a little more time out of it.
Could we freeze it?
I would not suggest freezing fresh vegetables, because what happens is the water that's inside the vegetable, when it freezes, it expands and it basically breaks the membrane. So then when you go to defrost it, it kind of becomes slushy, for lack of a better word. Yeah. So even if you're doing like greens, like collard greens or kale or broccoli, if there's a sale and you bought too much, always blanch it off first before you freeze it, because once you try to freeze it from its fresh state, it just doesn't cook the same when it comes back out of the freezer.
All right.
All right.
These tomatoes, there's a lot of research coming around what's called lycopene inside these tomatoes, and the research is pointing to the benefits for preventing degeneration of it's macular degeneration, which as we get older, we don't see as well, and that becomes clouded. So I think you'll see a lot more research around tomatoes and the addition of lycopene inside into the diet. You always think about carrots and eye health, but
right. I'm not a big fan of carrots. I mean, I like carrots, but I just feel like I'm chewing them forever. Like my mouth is like a natural shredder. I'm just like, oh, let's shred the carrots and shred the carrots. Like, oh, I gotta digest this. All right, so I got all my cores out of my tomatoes. Now I'm going to kind of lay them flat. If you want to be professional, you can take out these middle ridges by just running your knife along the middle, and it takes that middle ridge out and it gives you more of a flat surface, which is what I'm going to do. One, so I can cut them a lot faster. And if the ridges weren't there, this is kind of the same thing you do with green peppers or red bell peppers. Once
bring it up just a bit, Chef. Yeah,
say it again.
Yeah, bring it up just a little bit.
Oh, bring it up a little bit. Oh, gotcha. Right. I'm used to using the edge of my cutting board sometimes just because I don't want to lose any fingers on Zoom. That would not be a good look. All right, that's good. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get these into some slices. You guys can see. There we go. And you can make these chunks how big or how small you want. I just like them in a smaller form. If you want to go chunks, by all means, go to the chunkier one. All right, and that's pretty much how we want it. So I'm gonna go ahead and hack through the rest of these tomatoes as quickly as I can without losing a fingertip or a fingernail, or your interest because you're just watching me slice the same tomato over and over again.
Yeah,
Well, there's another interest. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Valerie.
This is another interesting compound within tomatoes, and they're called polyphenols. And phytonutrients inside here. And they are what give the plants their color, their odor, and their taste. So the phytonutrients inside these tomatoes actually, when the tomato is growing, it's a defense mechanism against other bacteria that might invade that tomato. Inside our body, it has a lot of health benefits. So it's not only a protection for the tomato itself while it's growing, but the health benefits of these phytonutrients that are inside of these tomatoes are another way to defend ourselves, help defend ourselves against invasive bacteria and diseases. So this is in essence a very immune boosting ingredient that he has here. And I know he's going to add some more other immune boosting ingredients over there because I see the greenery on the counter over there. So another great, very healthy snack.
So I was just going to ask, do we have any questions from anyone while Tim is chopping?
Everybody ask at once.
So everything that he's putting together here, all of these ingredients are, essentially this is all going to turn into blood sugar once you ingest all of this. That's the fuel that the body uses to cook, to help, see and hear and do their activities of daily living, and especially with studying, because you'll need a constant stream of glucose, because that's the form of energy that our body uses, including the brain, to help it function properly.
All right, so we have our tomatoes here, as everyone can see. All right, the next thing I'm going to slice up is some fresh basil. If recipes call for fresh basil, I would always use fresh basil, only because once basil is dried, it just doesn't give you the same punch as fresh basil. The dried basil will be gritty, for lack of a better term, because it's dry. I would not suggest trying to rehydrate it because it really won't do much of anything. Most herbs, once they're dry, they're just dry. So we're going to do a cut here called a chiffonade, which is a fancy French term for a nice thin slice. But the way we slice our basil is we have to stack it up. Make like a little sandwich there. And then do a nice little roll. And I'm gonna make a joke about rolling, but I'm not going to. I'll let you figure it out yourself. All right, and then we're gonna do a nice thin slice on top of this. Now, if your knife is sharp, all your slices should not turn dark green. If the edge where your knife is slicing starts to turn dark green very fast, that means your knife isn't sharp and you're not actually cutting the vegetable, you're just tearing it with the knife. So I have our fresh basil. And as you can see, if you look at my edges, come back there. They are pretty down a little bit. There's a lot.
Yeah, very nice, very colorful.
All right, I'm just gonna sprinkle that right in. Now you can add as much or as little basil as you would like. That's completely up to you. Some people like more of a basil punch, some people don't. I don't mind it. All right, next we have some parsley. Honestly, parsley doesn't really add much of a flavor, but I'm sure there are some healthy facts that parsley does add that I'm sure Valerie would love to hop in on.
Actually, I had learned through another program that I was doing that basil actually is part of the mint family. And I hadn't known that. So all great mints, peppermint, all that, those are herbs are fantastic in foods. And I think someone just commented that they freeze basil in olive oil, an ice cube tray.
Oh, I've never tried that. I normally just keep my herbs fresh. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss that in there.
Yes, so our question was, they hate to throw out the fresh basil, so do you have recommendations for leftovers, what you can do with the fresh basil before it goes bad?
You could definitely steep it in oil and just make some basil oil. You can just shove that whole piece of basil in there. You can either cut it up or leave it whole. If you're going to be using one of these type of dispenser type things, I would leave it whole just in case it gets stuck. You can just take it off and grab the whole thing out. Compared to if it's a bunch of little pieces, it'll just clog up the actual hole itself. Or you can make it in a separate container, put it in some cheesecloth and just let it seep in that way. You can put it into beverages. One of my favorite lemonades is a basil lemonade. I don't really like herbs in my drinks, so you'll never catch me drinking a mojito, but a basil lemonade, I will always go for. Just something about that freshness of the basil. I love, if you're into spirits or liqueurs, you can definitely put that into some of your standard drinks. If you're making a margarita, make a basil margarita. It's perfectly fine. Outside of that, I don't really know what else to do with the fresh basil. I've never tried to. Oh, you can fry it. You can fry it.
Yeah.
It will pop. It will pop a little bit. So be careful if you're gonna fry it. But that will definitely hold for a long time if you fry it. Thirsty and hungry. Good. You're making margaritas. Let me know, Kim. I'll come right over, or Kimberly, whichever one you prefer. All right. I'll bring the bruschetta. You make the drinks. Sounds good. All right. So we have our base for our bruschetta right here. To this, I'm gonna add some garlic. You can either use minced garlic that you buy, or you can mince up your own garlic. I'm not going to tell you which one I use because I don't want to give away my secrets. That'll probably let you know which one I used right there. And this recipe calls for a little bit of crushed red pepper. If you don't like spice, you can definitely leave the crushed red pepper out. If you do like spice, you can go ahead and add it in as little or as much as you would like. Beware, these pepper flakes, any pepper flakes will sneak up on you. So you might taste it now, like, oh, it's not that spicy. And then tomorrow when you go to taste it, it's like, whoa, what happened? All right. And then the recipe also calls for some balsamic vinegar or balsamic glaze. I'm gonna use balsamic glaze just because balsamic glaze is amazing. You can literally put this on everything. Like, it's that good. So I'm just gonna squeeze some of this in here. And then I'm gonna do a little draft of this EBO. I'm gonna take my same garlic spoon and give this a nice toss together. So if you're gonna make this a day ahead, I would omit the oil until the actual day you're gonna make it. I mean, you're gonna use it just because the oil will kind of start to break down and get all weird with whatever else is in there. So I would just make it, with the balsamic vinegar and just let that go. And then the next day, you can add your oil. Also, if you want to adjust the salt content, by all means, but we are trying to stay healthy, so I didn't add any added salt into it. The balsamic glaze does have some salt in it, so that's where I'll get my salty kick from. But if you want more, by all means, add more salt to it. All right. I can normally eyeball when it needs something else. I'm going to put some more of this balsamic in there just because you honestly cannot go wrong with putting more balsamic glaze in there.
Kimberly, I like that comment about impressing the Italian person that's living with you. That's a great idea.
Now the magic thing that we always have to do with everything that we have is we got to taste it. I'm going to talk about it in a minute once I finish enjoying this. That was really good. I think for this batch, I would add a pinch of salt. I didn't bring a pinch of salt, but it is what it is. So I'm going to show you how we're going to set these up on this little tray here. So we'll take our mix, put some on top. So if we're doing hors d'oeuvres, and top our crostinis like this. Another great variation is to add some capers into it and some fresh cracked pepper. That will kind of lead you on to more of a au poivre because of that fresh cracked pepper and the capers. And if you really wanted to go into it, you can get some thin sliced steak, like a skirt steak or something of that nature, and put it on the bottom and then put this mixture on top. That'd be phenomenal. So that's how it would look if I was doing an hors d'oeuvre style. I'm going to do an appetizer style. I'm going to use this corner over here. Of course, my bread doesn't want to stand up. I think it's the Italian back there making me nervous. I feel the heat. There we go. Just take this. Use these bowls. We'll put it in a little fancy bowl.
I think this also might be very good if you wanted to add a little bit more protein in it, but add from the animal side as well is as a feta cheese. A little bit of crumbling of feta cheese, I think would go really well with that tomato and especially the balsamic vinegar. Very nice.
Right there. And then of course, you cannot go wrong with more of this balsamic glaze. Just go across the top like this. And there you have it.
All right, we are just on time. I put a feedback form link in the chat for y'all to give us some feedback. And do we have any last minute questions before we close? For those of us that are on campus, can we come get some?
Very tempting.
About that. You guys come to the side door. I might can slide it out the side door.
This has been fun.
Not a problem, Brittany. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all. Y'all have been wonderful. Thank you, Chef. Thank you, Valerie. Always great, a pleasure to work with you guys. And we will be having another session in March. So I will make sure the folks that came today will know about that session in March.
I'll be there. Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, Chef. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.